That's right. The child is the father of the man. Between the TCFD and TNFD, which is the child and which is the father? If I may just go to the title of our... If I may go to the title of our panel, Strategies for Integrating the Two, I just thought I'll have to think about who is the person who will be doing that integrating, and what's the perspective that perhaps we haven't heard from today so far. So I thought I would play the role of a mid-level sustainability officer in my late 30s, early 40s, maybe based in Singapore with a business, could be financial, could be not, spread across emerging Asia, maybe even a bit of Japan and Australia. And I have to now deal with this one more abomination, this thing called TNFD. And, you know, having learned the great things that I did today, go back to my colleagues and introduce it to them. What will that look like? And will the precedence of TCFD help or hinder that process? By the way, can I check how many of you are approximately in that role right now? Okay, so hopefully we can relate to each other. And can I just say, you know, kudos to all of you. I think for a very long time, what's been underappreciated is the role of intrapreneurs inside of large, complex organizations who've been flying the flag for sustainability for about a decade. And the C-suite has only just caught on in recent years. But it's really been very much driven by, you know, bottom up. And unfortunately, this year, the winds seem to be changing. So if I use the Star Wars analogy that was used briefly in the previous session, the Empire strikes back. This year, there is a bit of a backlash. And those of you who are used to fighting the good fight, I think we need to get into a Return of the Jedi mindset as we do that. And to that extent, I think the TNFD creation process, the way it's got betas out there, consultations, it's designed to be globally inclusive, it encourages pilots, I think they're all very helpful in the way that it's happening. Okay, so back to the question. Do we get buy one, get one free with TCFD and TNFD, or is just an additional administrative hassle alongside all the other woke stuff that we have to deal with at work? Let's look at the data, and I'll use Asian data. I'm affiliated with the Center for Governance and Sustainability in Singapore, and they've done some good work on this. About 70% of the large listed companies in Asia Pacific issue some sort of sustainability report. But if you look at emerging Asia, Southeast Asia, for example, ASEAN, about 50% of them issue sustainability reports. But of those who do that, TCFD is the dominant framework, the 4 pillars of governance, strategy, risk management, metrics, and targets. That seems to be very much getting into the muscle memory of these organizations. By the way, quick quiz. In ASEAN, which country would you say has the highest adoption of TCFD? Between Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand. People would think that, but actually it's Philippines, then Thailand, and then Singapore. And the reason for that, and this is relevant to this discussion, is there is such a thing as last mover advantage. Because the others had started doing this before TNFD, TCFD came on the scene, they use GRI or SDGs and other frameworks, and they're having to now adopt. So TCFD in the muscle memory. Now, do you want me to stop, or should I continue?
Carry on.
I don't want to take too much time. Is it all right if I go on a bit? Okay. So, of those who are reporting on sustainability, I think it's also important to see which aspects of TCFD they are reporting on. So almost all of them feel comfortable listing the risks that they have identified, and they are even comfortable posting the metrics of what their emissions are right now. Some would even tell you what it was last year or the year before. What seems to be missing is, how did you identify those exposures? What is the linkage to your strategy? How have you integrated it into your overall risk management process? What are some of your forward-looking metrics and your KPIs? So those are missing, and that's good news and bad news in the sense that It's bad news in that it's missing, but the good news is that maybe TCFD and TNFD can do it together. Let's hold hands and talk about strategy and scenarios in a combined holistic manner, because you haven't quite done it in such a fully baked manner for TCFD that you'd feel offended if I ask you to redo it for TNFD. So I think we are in this Goldilocks situation where there is conceptual alignment, but there's also potential execution alignment between TCFD and TNFD. The way to try and do this is to not tax the cognitive bandwidth of organizations by trying to impose this as something completely new. So you look for points of entry that are already familiar with the organizations. And I think, again, TNFD does that very well. So if I hypothetically take the example, I think Craig mentioned Coca-Cola earlier on. TNFD has a suggestion that you use I think you call it the LEAP framework, L-E-A-P. What does it stand for? Locate your interfaces, evaluate, assess, P, prepare, okay. So locate, evaluate what your interfaces are. In the case of Coca-Cola, let's take two. You've got water on the one end and plastics at the other end. And I would suggest stop at two, maybe three, but no more, because this is so encompassing that it's very easy to get lost into every single touch point with nature. So pick the most material and then proceed on that. And you could do this either through LEAP. I like to do it visually with systems mapping. So put your company in the middle, your operations, your supply chains, your customers, and through the systems map, you're able to see what the interfaces are. And then you get your most material touch points, whether it's deforestation, forestation, whether it's bees, birds, whatever they are. Once you have it, then you plug into the TCFD workstream. You can almost do a find replace on your TCFD Word document and just replace climate change with natural capital impact or something like that. And that'll take you a good part of the way before you start having to do your own additional work. There is a challenge that I think applies to both TCFD and TNFD, and it's the challenge of the 3 Ds, data, definitions, data, and disclosures. And it's not something we'll have a solution to in one fell swoop. It's got to be done iteratively over time. And so, again, coming back to the role of that hapless individual I mentioned who's having to actually do the integrating inside these large organizations, I think their job is basically managing 4 paradoxes. And I can either mention them now or
Please.
may I?
Please go for it.
So again, put yourselves into the shoes of that person. And leadership is very much about paradox management, attention management, and these are the 4 tensions that we need to be mindful of. The first is that concept of which is the dominant framework, nature or climate. Now, in this room, we all know it is nature, of course. But practically speaking, I think TNFD will have to be a bolt-on, and as I said, reduce the dimensions to 1 or 2 most material and avoid cognitive overload so that we can build momentum as we go along. So don't boil the ocean is point number 1. Is that a pun in a nature-related conversation? Probably, yeah. So don't boil the ocean, that's 1. 2, we need to focus on metrics, but at the same time, we cannot ignore local context and the qualitative narrative. As a community, the finance community, we are in love with the quantitative, but quantitative can also be reductionist. And I think it's very important that we manage the tension between the 2 adages. What gets measured gets made, but not everything that counts can be counted. So that's the second tension. The third one is we need to over-communicate. This is a wicked, wicked problem. It's not a linear algorithm that people are solving. There's sequencing and pacing and 2 steps forwards, 1 step backwards that need to happen. It's a movie. You take a snapshot at any point in time, and it's very easy to say greenwashing or virtue signaling or hypocrisy, things like that. So we've got to communicate what's around the bend, what we don't know. Reporting has to be balanced and clear. People talk about consistency a lot over here, standardization. I think it's very important that your reporting engenders trust. That's the main purpose of reporting. Trust, transparency, and then everything else follows. And the last one is that we're going to remain in beta mode for a pretty long time. And what kind of direction do you give your people in that period? Because if you're waiting for perfection, no one's going to act. So you want people to act, but not induce motion sickness. So you need to be able to provide the right amount of guardrails and the right amount of direction of travel so that people are not put off by course correction along the way, but at the same time, they're able to move forward. So those, I think, at a practical level, what integrating TNFD and TCFD reporting would entail. I think it's what floats your, whatever floats your boat. I think you need the risk dimension is the most obvious because it's a clear and present danger and it's salient. But if you look at the 4 pillars of TCFD or TNFD, and the second one is strategy. And the question being asked there is, disclose to us what is your strategy across short-term, medium-term, long-term, and how have you incorporated nature and climate considerations in that strategy process? Now, you can sit there really miserable in your strategy off-site, or you can really think about the opportunities there. I'm not going to be just at the prevent deforestation end of the spectrum. I'm going to be at the create opportunities in reforestation end of the spectrum. And actually, a lot of opportunities come about through that process. So it's the orientation that people wish to take on it. And I think you're right, there needs to be more focus on the opportunity side of the spectrum. So it could go one of 2 ways. One is that, the climate bit gets solidified and ossified and you cannot amend that. Or it provides a template and you just say that climate is one of the 4 M's or one of 200 biomes. And so if the standard is written for biome XYZ, then climate is one and the others can follow.